right, again, so continuing on, what we've done is I now put the code in for the continue statement, and I put the same code we had in there for the for loop, but I said if I equals 6, continue. If this worked correctly, in other words, if I put it in, put all the code in, didn't screw it up, this should print out x equal 1, x equal 2, x equal 3, x equal 4, x equal 5, x equal, then it skips 6 and goes right to 7. So my total won't be 55 anymore. What is it? 55 minus 6 should be 49. Okay, so let's see if that one worked. First, I like to always go back and check and make sure I didn't break anything, and it looks like I didn't. Okay, so you can see it. There's no number 6 in there. All right. You can also see when we look at our break, we've only got the numbers from 1 or 0 through 5. All right. And that's, again, what I'm trying to show you. And really the LCV here, I think earlier I made the LCV equal to 1, so that's one of the reasons when I did that, the for loop looked a little bit off kilter with the rest. So all those that use the for loop, that should all be 1. It's not going to mean it doesn't mean anything, it's just the first time through, otherwise it prints out 0, where there was really no reason to do that. All right. Now they should look like little soldiers. There's while, do while, for, continue, and break. Again, we're going to go over the continue, we're going to go over the break in detail on Wednesday. All right? I'll just hold off talking any more about those right now, but again, we will. And if we do go through them on Wednesday, or when we go through them, if something doesn't make sense, by all means, please ask. All right? Now, what if I want to come in here, and this is what I'm going to do in this button right here, this LCV button, which right now doesn't do anything because you'll notice there's no code. No, there's no code in it. All right? Now, what I want to show you here, and it's not like it's a big thing, but I'm going to grab all my code for the for loop that we had in here before. I'll get rid of that continue, so that's not a big thing. We'll get that out of there in just a second. But I'm going to grab all of that code, and I'm going to put it in here for my LCV. And I'm going to remove that right there. All right, but what I want to do this time is I want to print out all of the even numbers only. You hear what I said? The even numbers only from 1 to 10. That's all I want to print out. Okay, well, the problem is really right here, because I'm adding 1 to it each time. But I don't have to add 1 to it each time. I can add as many things as I want to add to it. So in other words, instead of saying LCV plus plus, I can say LCV plus equals 2, which is the same thing as saying LCV equals LCV plus 2. All right, so the current value, now I'll say sum of even numbers, 1 to 10. Let's see if that worked. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and the total is 30. 10, 18, 24, 28, 30. That was just to show you that you can manipulate the loop control variable, if indeed that's what you want to do. Now you'll notice I went back and I reset that because it was 1. If I didn't, I would be adding 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. In other words, I'd be adding the odd numbers. So if I wanted to do that, or I could have come in here and just started with 2. Either one of those ways would have worked. That would have probably been a little cleaner way to do it. Now I won't have 0 in there when it shows me the numbers. Okay. So that was designed to show you that you can go in and manipulate the loop control variable. All right. Now, clear already works. Exit already works. So the only other thing that was in there was info. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat because I've already got it. So I'm going to, I don't want that. That's not what I wanted to do. So I'm going to grab that and paste that in here. And when I run the program again, now when I click info, it gives me some information on how to run the program. Okay? You didn't have to do that, but you know, do the while, the do while, etc. So you can see all the different stuff that's in there. All right? So how did I do that one? Well, what I did was I created a string, and it said there, explanation of program buttons. That's going to be the title that goes into my message box. And then I'm setting up the caption. Don't know why the word loop is all capitalized there. I must have done something to make that happen, but all right. While loop, do while loop, loop. All right. That'll look a little nicer, I think, when I run it. So I'm just building a string right here. Remember that plus equals? I showed you that with a number. You can use plus equal with a string too. Not only is there a plus equals, there's a plus equals for numbers, there's a minus equal for numbers, a times equal for numbers, a divide equal for numbers, and a modulo, which is the percent sign, equal for numbers. All those would work. All right. So again, now it looks a little nicer. You can see it got a little bit wide here. Click continue. Click continue button. That's because a couple places in here I forgot my backslash n's. See all this stuff in here at the beginning, or at least at places in here, backslash n. That means put a new line in there. In other words, it's as though I went in and hit the enter key. Hopefully that fixed it. All right. Again, it's not beautiful, but it's functional, which is all I was looking for in there. Okay. Would be kind of nice when you do your guessing game program to have some kind of an info button that you build that very simply just explains to the user what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to play the game. Okay. So that's it. What I'm gonna do though, since it's 9:30, I'm gonna spend just a little bit of time. I'm gonna jump back, and I'm gonna actually jump into the book here. And at least start to go over the chapter. Now, most of the stuff in the chapter, if you look right here, we've already gone over more about list boxes. We'll go over it again, but we've already gone over it. The while loop, already went over it. Plus plus, I already talked about it. The plus plus has an equivalent that's minus minus that removes one. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about those. The for loop, the do while loop. So we've talked about most of the stuff that's in here. What we haven't talked about is all the stuff on this side. Using files for data storage, and we're talking about using a file. The last chapter the author goes through in the book says, you know, files are kind of passé. Most of the world revolves around databases. So he talks about databases. But in this chapter, he'll talk about files. And it works out nice because those of you who are in both classes, guess what? We talk about files today in Java. Open dialog and save dialog, you can literally drag those controls out there, and when you drag one of those controls out there, you know, you do an open dialog, it'll be one of these. It'll look like that. Literally, you just drag the control out there. You can make it look any way you want it to look, so we'll talk a little bit about that. The save one looks pretty much like that. And you'll see those in just a couple minutes, or next class. Then we go into random numbers, and then we talk a little bit about the load event. All right? So we've talked about the list box. I already showed you in the class today, that's how you add things to a list box. By default, when you do a list box, the name of your list box, .items.add, it adds it to the end of the list box. Sometimes that may not be where you want to add it. So you don't have to. You can position where you add something. So they got a simple example in here where they add Chris and Alicia and Justin and Holly. And they go in that order. Remember, when you create the list box like that, that the list box, and you can see this, you can all see this. If we go back, I hate doing this, but that's fine, I'll do it anyway. So yeah, this will work. There's the list box right there. All right. The list box has a property down toward the bottom that's called sorted. If you set that to true, it doesn't matter the order in which you put things into the list box. When you run the program, they will be sorted in an alphabetic order based on that. All right, and there's a numeric type of sort that you could use also. There's an items count property. Notice if the list box is empty, the items count equals 0. In other words, it shows you how many items are stored in the list box. So when we did it that one time, when I put in the numbers from 1 to 10, count would be 10. When we put in the even numbers between 1 and 10, count would be 5. All right. The clear I've already shown you. You are also, by no means are you obligated that you have to clear the entire list box. You can just clear an element if you want to. Okay? And I think I've said this to you more than once, but I'm going to say it again, that if I go out in Google and I type in here C# list box methods, all right, I was going to say I'm willing to bet you the first thing that's going to come up, and it's the first 3, all right, they're all from msdn.microsoft.com. So if I come over here and find the one that says methods, there's quite a few methods in here that we didn't talk about, that the author mentions. There they all are. So why doesn't the author go through all of them? Because there's probably 30 or 40 of which you probably use 10%, 90% of the time. All right. So the while loop, again, pre-test loop. All right. When the expression is true, do something. It has 2 parts. The expression that you test for truthfulness, all right, and a way to get out of the loop. So again, it's what I just showed you a couple minutes ago. So if I come in here and say int I equals 1, while I less than or equal to 10, and if we come in here and we say something, you know, like a print, some kind of a print statement, just print I, something like that. That's going to literally print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Now, I showed you this before, too. If we don't want to put this in like this, we can say int I and not give it a value. Or we could come in here and set it up in here. Okay, in fact, let's do this. We'll say equals 0. Now I can say while plus plus I less than or equal to 10, and it'll do the same thing. There's all sorts of different variations of this you can use. Okay. Many of which are discussed in here. What most people do is they pick a way to go through a loop that they're comfortable with. That's the way they use. What goes in the parentheses of a while, it's a Boolean expression, so it must be something that the computer can discern and tell whether or not it's true or it's false. All right. So they give some examples in here. Displays the word hello 5 times. Again, count equal count plus 1. So I think we've talked about this before, but just so everybody hears this, if I want to add 1 to count, there are now 4 ways we know how to do that. You can say the old way, count equal count plus 1. That's probably the dumbest way. You can say count plus equals 1. You can say plus plus count, or you can say count plus plus. Any one of those will add 1 to count. Again, which one do you use? I will tell you, if you're a professional programmer, you don't use that one. But as far as which of the other ones you use, it's a matter of choice. And again, as I mentioned, there is also an equivalent here of a minus. There is a difference between saying minus minus count and count minus minus, but not if it's on a line by itself. Those two are 100% identical. So when are they different? We'll talk about that on Wednesday. Again, the while is a pretest. You've already heard this. But if I come through here and I say this, while I less than or equal to negative 22, that's never going to run because I is 0. 0 is not less than or equal to negative 22. Right, it's a pretest, so you make your test at the beginning of the loop. On the other hand, if I do this same exact thing that you see right here, but instead of doing it as a while, I do it as a do-while statement, and a do-while is a post-test. I always go through this. It's going to automatically print out the value here, so it'll print out 0, then it'll test it, and it'll be done. So sometimes people write there, when you want to write some code that you're sure is going to run, they put it first into a do-while loop to make sure that it runs. All right, and then once they're happy with it, they change it over onto a while loop. Okay, some people like writing do-while loops all the time. Some people will do whatever they can to not write them. The counter variable is what I called LCV, or the loop control variable. Got a program in here that figures out, I think, your starting balance, the number of months you had of interest, and it gives you your ending balance. Okay, so you can take a look at that if you have an interest in it. Again, there's some good programs in here. There's just not enough time to go over everything. All right, infinite loops. If you have problems with that, you can go ask Eric. All right, but when you get an infinite loop, think about this. What if I did this? So I'm going to say while I is less than or equal to 10, and what I normally want to do would be to print it and then say this, I plus plus. That'll work just fine. Okay? What if I do this? What's happening if I do that? I'm getting farther away from 10, not closer to 10. That'll be an infinite loop. All right? Usually when you go into an infinite loop, you'll know, because the machine will start doing weird things. It's not as bad as it used to be. When I worked on a mainframe and a mid-range, what would happen when your program would go into an infinite loop, it would keep grabbing all the memory it could. And if you were sharing a mainframe with 20 other people like I was doing, and you got into an infinite loop, pretty soon you closed all their programs down because it was just your program taking over. Then your program would close down too. It's not a good way to make friends. All right? But that would be an infinite loop. If that happens, the thing is, if that happens, and you go, well, I'll do a Control-Alt-Delete. When you do a Control-Alt-Delete from inside of here, what that does is it does a Control-Alt-Delete, but not on your virtual desktop. It does it on your non-virtual desktop. All right? So you've got to make sure that when you do this, you click down here in your gutter down here, then do your Control-Alt-Delete. And I'll tell you that, and at least one person will still have a problem and will still do it the wrong way. I still do it the wrong way. So the plus plus and minus minus, let's just talk about when they are different, and then we'll leave it at the period. All right, so I'm going to grab all this stuff and just get rid of it right now. So I'm going to create two variables. Int x equals 7, and I'm going to say here int y equals 0. So, now, if I say this, plus plus x, x is now 8. Or if I say this, x plus plus, both those are exactly the same thing. But these are different. All right, in the first case, now I'll just put it down, then we'll go back and talk about it. But in the first case, now, let's see, x equals 8 and y equals 8. In the second case, x equals 8, y equals 7. Because this is called pre-increment, and that's called post-increment. So what this one here does is it says, oh, the plus plus is at the beginning. Add 1 to x, which makes it 8, then assign the result of x, which is 8, to y. Because that's pre-increment. This is a post-increment. So it says take whatever x is, which was 7 up here, and assign it to y, and then go in and add 1 to x. Especially with newer programmers, this is one of the things with a lot of new programmers, they get very confused over. So I tell you that if it makes more sense, break it up over 2 lines. Again, program for clarity and understandability for you right now. Don't worry about seeing how swift you can make something run. It's more important that you understand what it is you're trying to do. All right? So he explains that in here, does a pretty good job. And he goes over the for loop, which again I've already talked about with you. In fact, I think the for loop is also a pretest loop. So in other words, if I write a for loop and I do this, for int I equal 10, I less than or equal to 3, I plus plus. How many times am I going through that loop? I'm not. They do mention you can do this. Use the minus minus with it. Okay? This is a very important point right here on 286. The only place you should modify a loop control variable is when you're adding to it or removing from it. You shouldn't be doing a lot of junk with that loop control variable. So what you did in your program, you printed it out. Yeah, but I wasn't modifying it, that cell temp that I used for the loop control variable. I just printed it out, or I added to it. That's all I was doing. That's what they talk about here on 286. Another program, when he works with speed, there's nothing wrong with the program. Okay. The do while we've already gone over. So please, at least page through this before the next class, and if you have questions, it'll be your time to ask. I'm going to finish, but this is different. This is new. This talks about how you can save your output to a file so that you can use it. All right? And we'll take a quick look at that. But again, my hope is there's about 35 or so pages left in the chapter. My hope is in the first hour of class on Wednesday, we can finish the rest of the lecture. And then the remainder of the period will be lab. All right, remember, we meet next week, and 2 weeks from now, you won't be here. It's break week. All right, last thing I'll tell you, you'd all just look up on the screen here for a second, because people still, no matter how many times I say it, still don't do it the right way. Again, if you go out for this class or the previous class or whatever, there's a folder called syllabus-course evaluation. When you go to the course evaluation, copy that file to your desktop. If you put it on your virtual desktop, I can't see it anyway, so you could even leave it there if you wanted to, but you don't have to. I'm going to open a read-only copy here, but what I want to show you is this. All this stuff is filled in for you already up here. These are drop-downs. The content of the course was consistent with the course description. You don't have to write on here. So for whoever did that last semester and wrote yes for everything, you don't have to do that. If you click right here, it's a drop-down. Okay, and then, I don't know why it's not showing. It's read-only, that's why. Okay, that's why it's not showing it to me. Yeah, fine. I'll save it to the desktop. So the course content was description. If it's not, it's below average type of thing. All right? I will tell you, this stuff, if you want to fill it out, fine. If you don't want to, that's fine. How could the course be improved? Please, everybody put down if we had some decent computers. All right? I was reading the write-up after my boss, and she wrote to me, "Gee, Jeff, are your computers in need of being changed?" You know, yes. Hell yes. I won't go any further than that because I'm taping, but I could put another word in there and say yes. But I'm hoping that by this, the end of the year, by the end of the school year, they will be updated. This was the first room that had new computers, and it was the first room that got this stuff fixed up. Now every other room has surpassed this room. And I've tried to let them know that's not a good thing in this kind of program. And I've been told, well, thanks for letting us know that.